Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am pleased to open and also moderate our conference. And I'm very pleased that our today's conference is entitled Development of Hydrogen Infrastructure of Ukraine. We know that in Ukraine, we already have the debates about the use of hydrogen technologies. And prior to this conference, we were mainly focusing on the use of hydrogen in the energy sector. But today, I suggest us to focus on hydrogen infrastructure and the use of hydrogen infrastructure for vehicles, for road vehicles, and also for other sectors, transportation sectors. So all the consumers that are actually fueled by carbohydrates. And now I would like to give the floor to the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure of Ukraine for European Integration, Anna Yurchenko. Anna Yurchenko, are you with us? Good afternoon. Yes, I'm here. The host has disabled videos, so I cannot turn on my camera. If possible, I would like to have access to sharing my video. Well, anyway, I can start speaking without any video. First and foremost, I would like to welcome all the participants of this webinar. And I would like to say that the governments of the European states have ambitious targets in terms of the increase of the share of biofuel and renewable energy sources in the energy sector. Currently in Ukraine, as well as in other European countries, there is the rise in the demand on environmentally friendly technologies that would help to reduce CO2 emissions and also to decrease the dependency on fossil fuels. Currently, these innovations would help to reduce the environmental impact for those cars that are currently fueled by oil and oil products. Currently, in railroads, we have only 2 to 3% electric rolling stock. So we have the plans to change that situation. And currently, we are taking measures to incentivize the transition to electric transport. And also, currently, there are tender procedures conducted between Ukraine and the World Bank. Currently, there are some trams, trolley buses, and electric buses procured for certain cities of Ukraine. The total worth of the contract is 160 million euro. And we already see the outcomes of these contracting procedures in 11 cities of Ukraine. Moreover, in 11 more cities, we want to use the similar approach, and we hope that the similar agreement will be signed between Ukraine and European Investment Bank. This program is called Urban Transport 2.0, and this contract is to be ratified soon. So we hope that it will be signed in the nearest future. And we hope that the cities will be able to contribute from this project. Besides, we are preparing for the third project with the World Bank. And we are waiting for the decision of the World Bank to make investments into green energy and development of electric vehicles infrastructure in Ukraine. The Ministry of Infrastructure is currently working on the issues of the registration of electric vehicles in Ukraine. Besides, we have the plans to introduce some restrictions on the procurement that would be introduced phase by phase. The respective bills are fully aligned with the EU directives. We have the aim of harmonizing Ukraine's practice with the best practices globally. Besides, we would like to introduce the environmental tax for CO2 emissions. And 80% of that environmental tax would be used for the improvement of the current energy efficiency infrastructure. Besides, there is a need to introduce the network, the chain of electric vehicles charging stations and also the charging stations for the commuter vehicles, the commuter trains. Besides, hydrogen could become the alternative for the railroad and also for road transport. The use of hydrogen is also has also high potential for rivers and for trains as well. And to summarize my part, I would like to underscore the fact that it is very important to commit to the obligations that Ukraine has undertaken. In the part of the transportation improvement and the improvement of Ukraine's economy towards a greener economy. Thank you so much, Anna, for your introductory remarks. We hope that further on the issues of hydrogen infrastructure would attract no less attention from the Ministry of Infrastructure, since the initiatives that you have mentioned are of paramount importance, and they also are the signals for the business that this is a priority for the next years to come. Respectively, we have to prepare ourselves so that the changes that are introduced are not coming out of the blue, but are well planned, and so that the economic operators would only benefit from it and not suffer the blow. And now I would like to pass on to Mr. Artem Semantian, Executive Director of the Solar Energy Association of Ukraine, advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister on European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. Mr. Artem Semantian, over to you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Ms. Anna Yurchenko raised a couple of very important issues, the renewable energy sources for transport. According to the National Transport Plan for 2020, Ukraine has not attained its targets for the use of renewable energy sources in transportation. It means that we are not making the desired progress towards decarbonization and also decarbonization of transportation sector. If we are speaking about the waterway infrastructure, this could be also the accelerate hydrogen infrastructure could also be the accelerator into the bright future of the cleaner energy. And we have plenty of information to discuss since the oil and gas prices are record high in the global markets, and that results in the shift of the paradigm of the use of transportation vehicles and transportation means. I hope that our today's meeting would be fruitful and it would contribute to the development of hydrogen infrastructure. It would contribute also to the switch to electric vehicles, and also it would encourage the government to take the necessary incentives. Thank you so much, Mr. Artem Semantian. And I would like just to give you a small reminder. We will have a Q&A session that would be held at the end of this panel. So you can submit your questions and later on at the end, we will be able to respond to those. And now I would like to give the floor to Nazar Chernявsky, who is a partner of Sayenko Harenko law firm. Speaking of the development of hydrogen infrastructure, And speaking of new startups and new technologies introduction, it is important to make a couple of reminders of the legal aspects, which play a key role over here. We are very happy that you have joined us here today with your legal expertise, and I hope that your expertise would be very beneficial to the Ministry of Infrastructure and also to the Ministry of Environment. Thank you so much for this kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Well, yes, indeed, being a leading law firm, we cooperate with the representatives of the biggest Ukrainian companies and also representatives of the biggest foreign investors. And at one point or another, we were engaged in the market developments, be it the launch of new products, search for the best solutions in terms of the legal framework or other aspects. We live in the world that is changing rapidly. And at the moment, the concept of sustainable development is becoming more and more important. The so-called ESG development comes to the fore, meaning that all the companies are very much interested in their economic operations not to be simply cost efficient, but also to provide for the sustainable future. That is why the hydrogen and also the renewable energy sources and green hydrogen, to be more specific, is a very interesting topic for us as a law firm. And we would like to make our contribution for the development of this sector. We would like to draw attention to this topic, not just from the public, but also from the business sector. But for the business sector to be interested in green hydrogen, we need to create transparent legal conditions. On our part, we will do our best for this industry, for this sector, to boost and to be of interest for all the stakeholders. Thank you so much, Mr. Nazar Chernevsky. And I would like to give the floor to Roman Shakhmatenko, who is the Deputy Minister of Environment. I am very grateful that Roman has joined us here today. We've been working together under the working group in the Ministry of Energy. This is the working group on hydrogen strategy development, and I know that you are an active member in all the discussions on this important document. And also getting back, coming back from COP26, we knew that the achievements of Ukraine have been highly appreciated, and Ukraine looked pretty good globally thanks to the efforts of the Ministry of Environment. So, Roman, over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this event. And it's really good to see that all stakeholders understand the need to discuss these important topics and the need to do something about it and to move ahead. Truly, this is a unique situation when we are moving in step with our international partners. We are almost moving with the same speed with our international partners, because if we look at the development of the hydrogen strategies and environmental impact of the hydrogen strategies, we might be one of the first to implement these procedures, and we will be able to see an objective picture. And I would like to give you a short message looking back how we discussed a year ago things around hydrogen, and that seemed to be quite fantastic things that we have been discussing. But today we see that this transformation is very realistic. It is very feasible, and it might be one of the few ways ahead that we have for the real and effective decarbonization. And this transformation should happen in many areas. But one of the most important ones is regulation. And what our colleague from the Ministry of Infrastructure said, that there are legal drafting taking place and regulations are being developed. But what else we need are some change drivers like associations, companies, law firms, investors that can really push these things in the real economy. We need R&D projects in order to see that we have the necessary technologies. We need the academic specialists. We need researchers. And one of the interesting things that you have already raised today is the use of hydrogen infrastructure in transport. Because if you really look at it, it can be a very effective way of reducing emissions in our cities and to really make the air breathable or better. So I'm very happy to welcome all the participants at this event, and on behalf of the Ministry of Environment, we are always open. I always put aside all my works and I try to take part in all the events that relate to hydrogen, and I think the organizers will confirm that. We are always open to receive any proposals about regulation of hydrogen. We want to be as helpful as we can be. Any questions you can address to us. We are happy to support you with the research expertise. So I wish you a productive meeting, and thank you again for the invitation. Thank you, Roman. Truly, you are one of the few representatives of the ministries that have never missed any of our events, of our working group meetings. Thank you very much for your active support. And truly, many decisions have been already discussed and are now in the process of being finalized. Regarding the strategy, I hope that in the next quarter of 2022, we will really see that Ukraine will get its own hydrogen strategy. Thank you. And now I would like to move to our next point in our agenda, which is the EU hydrogen strategy and its connection to the sustainable and smart mobility structure in the EU countries. And truly, European Union is one of our nearest super drivers of this technology. Last year, we were included in the European hydrogen strategy, which really gives us a lot of advantages in deepening our cooperation and in our Euro integration inspirations. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Jose Samino, the head of the EU Technical Assistance Project, further support to the implementation of the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement and the National Transport Strategy in Ukraine. Mr. Jose, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alexander. Well, my presentation is about the hydrogen strategy of the European Union and how it is linked with the sustainable and smart mobility strategy of the European Union. First of all, I have to say that I'm the team leader of this project, but in what concerns my opinions, these do not can be taken as the opinions of the European Union. Please, next slide. As you know, the European Union has launched the Green Deal, which is not a new strategy, but has new targets. So it is a continuation of the white paper and other policies of the European Union regarding environment and energy. And the three main goals is to not to leave nobody behind. This is mainly driven by the emergency of the COVID situation. To decouple the economic growth from the use of resources, and to go to achieve a no net emissions economy by 2050. Next slide, please. Therefore, this EU Green Deal calls for a change over the total change for the economy. So transport is only one, so as to say, leg of this general effort, but this leg is not the smallest one, because transport is responsible for a lot of the CO2 emissions. And well, we are not talking about only about CO2. As you know, there are other gases that with greenhouse effect. Okay. When next slide, please. What is the role of the hydrogen in all this? The vision of the European Union for 2050 is that mainly all the energy, or almost all the energy, will come from sources that do not produce CO2. Okay, so we are talking about renewables and well, other technologies. But not everything in the world can be plugged in 2050. So here is where hydrogen plays a role. Hydrogen can be used as a fuel. In both, there are two ways in which the hydrogen can be used as a fuel: in combustion, or to make a reverse electrolysis and create energy that can go to a battery, and this battery can power a motor of whatever vehicle you want. Another thing that is very important for the hydrogen is that it can serve as storage. So once you have storage this hydrogen, it can be used to produce energy in the later stage. And the third application for this hydrogen in what concerns transport would be the creation of synthetic fuels that made out of renewable sources of energy. So as to understand each other, is like to create jet fuel out of clean hydrogen. Okay, and here is the key word. What is the clean hydrogen? Could you please next slide? We have different kinds of hydrogen. Well, we only have one hydrogen, which is H2, but the hydrogen can come from different sources. Fossil fuels, you can get the hydrogen out of industrial processes for the oil. You can get it from anthracite, you can get it from black coal. Okay, this hydrogen is not the objective of our policy, because this hydrogen will also create in the process of being produced, will also create greenhouse gases. So the objective of which hydrogen is interesting for us is the green, which is produced out of renewable energies, sources of energy, or the blue, which is created out of fossil fuels, but with carbon capture. So nowadays there have been developed technologies that can capture the CO2, creating zero net emissions in this process, and this hydrogen would also be of our interest. Okay, there you have different prices for the different kind of hydrogens. These prices just reflect what is written in the hydrogen strategy of the EU, And of course, these prices change, especially as Artem already pointed, that the fossil fuel price is increasing. So these numbers are subject to change. So we have seen which hydrogen is interesting for us. We have seen what is it for. Okay, which is the vision for 2050 of the use of this hydrogen in the transport. Next slide, please. In the vision 2050, the European Union made different scenarios based on different assumptions about which will be the contribution of the hydrogen in 2050, okay? The two last scenarios, which are pointed in red, mark the scenarios that will allow to achieve net zero emissions in 2050. So we are in these last two scenarios. As you can see, the hydrogen will play a role about 15% of the needs of the transport sector. Now that we have seen these preliminary points, we are going to see what does the hydrogen strategy of the European Union say. Good. Next slide, please. Okay, this hydrogen strategy is a supply strategy. So this strategy is about how to create, how to produce the green and blue hydrogen. The applications of this green blue hydrogen to different sectors, and for the case of our interest for transport, are developed in the sustainable and smart mobility strategy that we are going to see afterwards, okay? This hydrogen strategy has three main phases. From now, 2020 to 2024, the goal is to boost the supply of renewable hydrogen to 5 gigawatts. So 1 million tons of renewable hydrogen per year, okay? In this stage, up to 2024, there will be limited need for hydrogen infrastructure, because the idea is to create this hydrogen next to the place where it's going to be consumed, okay? And the policy focus will be to bridge the cost gap between the different kinds of hydrogen that we have seen in the slide before, okay? From 2025 to 2030, the supply will be enhanced up to 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen. And the excess of renewable electricity will be transformed into hydrogen. When we will have this excess of renewable electricity producing hydrogen, we will need to create a logistic infrastructure of how to storage and how to move this hydrogen in liquid or gas form from the point of production to the point of consumption, okay? The last phase, 2030 to 2050, a lot of the technologies related to hydrogen will have reached maturity, that is commercial viability, okay? And the deployment of these technologies will be large scale to the sectors that are difficult to decarbonize. As we have said, this is from the side of the supply. Now we are going to see what is from the side of the demand in what concerns transport. Could you please move the slide? Okay, the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy of the EU is a document that contains 14 objectives or something like that. And the hydrogen is not the center of this strategy. However, the hydrogen is mentioned under different flagships of this strategy from the demand side. For example, mentioning for the road transport, it can be used for hydrogen fuel cell cars. This is what we saw, that the hydrogen can be used to reverse the electrolysis and power give power to a battery that will power a motor. Okay. The hydrogen, where electrification of the railways network is not possible, can also play a role. In this sense, there are already trains that are being tested and working with hydrogen. Okay. For the air and waterborne transport, it can be done also electric, but normally the size of the motor and the power and so on make it difficult. So it will be probably used through synthetic fuels. So diesel and jet fuel and another kind of fuels will be created out of hydrogen. And as this demand of green hydrogen increases, certain infrastructure has to be built to power. I mean, if it's like very obvious, if you acquire a train that is using hydrogen, somebody has to think also in parallel to build the place from where this train is going to get the hydrogen. Okay. Regarding the flagship 2, the ports and the airports are seen as prospective future hubs for renewable energy and hydrogen. Okay. Then there's all this hydrogen has, although the technologies are very old, the innovation needed to bring them to commercial use will need a lot of investment in research and technology. And one of the ideas is to create hydrogen aircraft. Okay. And last but not least, the mention the sustainable and smart mobility strategy supports the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, for which you have the link down there, and you can watch what is this initiative about. But this initiative is not unknown for Ukraine. Next slide. This European Clean Hydrogen Alliance has the goal to identify a pool of investment projects along the hydrogen value chain that will make significant contributions to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, there you have all the participants, for Ukrainian participants of this European Alliance. I have signaled in yellow the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine, and I have marked with a little bit bigger box the Ukrainian Hydrogen Council, because they are co-organizing these events with us today. Okay. In November 2021, this alliance has published a list of projects to be financed and invested. Okay, next slide. In this process, Ukraine has taken a very active role. So the greener the thing, the most active was the role in participating in the proposals. So you can see that Ukraine has been very active. And there are 19 projects that are being included in this pipeline of future investment projects of the hydrogen in Europe. I think that this is the right way to cooperate and to integrate the capacities of Ukraine into the European Union to participate together in investment projects, in research and development, and step by step go together along this long process of the introduction of hydrogen up to 2050. Thanks for your attention.
Дуже дякую вам, пане Хосе.
Thank you very much, Jose. Well, yes, indeed, this information was very valuable to us because we have to understand how quickly all these technologies are developing and how quickly this process is unfolding in the European countries, since the EU is our main strategic partner. I believe that at the moment, cooperation within the framework of our Euro integration investment project is very important. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Vice Prime Minister on European integration pay special attention to it. And getting back to that point, Ms. Anna Yurchenko, we actually have the question that was addressed to you personally. So if you are with us, I would like to ask that question now. Do you have any plans as the Ministry of Infrastructure to develop the bill on disposal of lithium batteries? And will there be a tax on disposal of lithium batteries? I understand that this is a burning issue, given that there is an increase in the number of electric vehicles in Ukraine. And quite soon we will have to answer the question, what do we do with those batteries that are out of use? Do you have any initiatives in the ministry in this regard? Oh, Anna Yurchenko is not with us. Well, I think that we can give the answer to this question separately later on. So now I would like to pass on to Sergei Pavlov, Director of the Department of Development and Technical Policy of joint stock company Ukrzaliznytsa. And there is also another question which is also pertaining to the railway systems. So we will ask that question after your presentation. Sergei, over to you. Good afternoon, dear participants of our webinar. Sergei Pavlov unfortunately was not able to join you for the webinar. I am his deputy, and I would like to say that in the first part of our today's webinar, we have heard that hydrogen is on the rise. It is becoming more trendy, and of course, it is the environmentally friendly way to store energy. And of course, we know that there are high prospects for railroad systems, and we were also following closely the developments, for instance, Rail Track 2021, the Polish exhibition, and also we are following closely the new developments in Spain, testing of locomotives, new type of locomotives. With regard to Ukrzaliznytsa, we are working on the diesel-driven engines and locomotives for the southern railroad section, and we also have the new program for electricity for electric engines being used, and we hope that soon we will be able to switch from diesel-driven locomotives to electric locomotives. And we are following the global trends. Respectively, we have noticed that this is something that is the nearest future, the hydrogen technology. At the same time, I would like to underline the fact that there is a need for a proper legal regulation to be in place. There is the need for the proper legal framework. brief, in a nutshell, we are ready to consider various options of how to keep pace with the global trends. That's it from my side. I would like just to add to your part the following information. After COP26, British government has bought 6 hydrogen-fueled trains from Alstom company. They have been watching closely this technology for years now, and in Germany, there is a hydrogen-fueled locomotive that has been in operation for years. So it means that this technology is becoming more and more widespread. There is an interesting question with regard to the railroads, and it is as follows. One of the EU directives within the framework of EU Green Deal provides for the transition of 30% of cargo transportation for 300 kilometers, and that should be only by railway systems, since the CO2 emissions by railroad vehicles is lower than by road vehicles. So what about Ukrzaliznytsia? Will you adhere to these targets, and will you switch to the increase in the use of the railroads for the cargo shipments? Since according to the Ministry of Infrastructure, the railroad transport is now of priority. Besides, there is a list of legal initiatives that are now under review on the new initiatives for transport. And Ukraine actually joined this process, and these initiatives are binding for Ukraine, and that means the use of renewable gases, including hydrogen, both in energy and also for other transportation.
Sergey, are you with us? Or sorry, I apologize, the deputy to Mr. Sergey. Are you still with us? I guess not. Well, I hope in a due time we will get in touch with all the relevant officials who can comment to answer the questions in the chat, and we can give you the answer later on. But I suggest we move to the next item in our agenda, which is aviation and airspace and countries with existing examples of hydrogen use. And I would like to give the floor to Alexander Diachenko, Vice President of the Ukraine Hydrogen Council. Yes, hello, I hope you can hear me. Yes, we can. Just a minute, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yes, we can. Yes, hello. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to speak at this event today on this very important topic as aviation and this sector of economy in transport. First of all, I would like to focus on the three main aspects to make this topic more relevant for everyone. Firstly, aviation is 2.2% of all CO2 emissions globally. And if you compare it to the motor vehicles, where the emissions are 14%, it's important to understand that one aircraft emits multiple times more than a vehicle. And hydrogen engine in aviation can be 2 to 3 times more effective compared to similar technology in motor vehicles. And I would like to begin with saying that, like I said, 2.2 CO2 emissions are in the aviation sector. And Bloomberg made a forecast saying that in the nearest future, by 2035 or 2040, due to the increasing demand in air travel, these emissions will be even higher. And there have been many projects that have been launched and approved and are being now financed, and they're now being actively developed, which will enable sometimes in 2025 to remain at the same level of 2%, and then step by step reduce the emissions, and then we will eventually get to the net zero aviation transport. Also, I would like to focus your attention on the importance of the infrastructure. Most probably, the priority development will be given to the middle commercial segment, the mid-long distance up to 1,500 kilometers. And similar projects have been launched in the UK, which are mid-size commercial aircraft with the 80 passengers capacity, and that can carry passengers from Scotland to UK. And in the large segment of aircrafts of 200 passengers or more, the hydrogen is in the compressed state, 230 degrees, and you need to spend some energy to sustain its in its form. And these projects will be connecting passengers between continents, between Kiev and New York and Tokyo, and the infrastructure, like I said, will play an important role, because those airports that can accommodate such aircrafts and maintain its needs and be able to support the aircraft travel will be of top priority. The most significant projects are Airbus. They have announced 3 aircrafts, and I would like to draw your attention to the 2 of them, which is turbofan classical jet, which is over 2,000 kilometers of a distance in flight, and also a smaller aircraft used in internal domestic flights. And since we are discussing hydrogen and hydrogen in aviation, we should understand that hydrogen will increase the aviation sector by 2 to 3 times. So aircrafts will become more effective as passenger carriers, and they will spend less resources on the same distances. And most probably they will become cheaper. Actually, in relation to railway transport, which according to hydrogen community is one of the most potential sector in terms of hydrogen technology implementation. The aviation sector is not going to develop as fast as railway or motor transport, but it will get a significant growth in 2025, 2027, and I'm confident it will play a very significant role in cargo and passenger transport. Also, I would like to touch on the use of hydrogen in airspace. There is a lot of experience already in this industry for over than 30 years since hydrogen was already used as a fuel in space launch systems. And I believe that integration of the hydrogen use in space industry will speed up the transition and implementation of hydrogen technologies in aviation transport. That's actually all I wanted to say, and I will be happy to respond to your questions. Thank you very much, Alexander. And I would like to add that our association have already received requests from the domestic producer working in the small aviation sector. They have developed the concept for the air taxi, which is now working using lithium batteries, and their storage capacity is up to 300 kilometers. But the request from them was what's the following: when using the hydrogen technology as the fuel for their engines, the distance can be increased up to 700 to 800 kilometers. And they have approached Korean companies to design these fuel cell technology for them. I believe this is a huge market that will be shaped in the nearest few years. And those who are able to use this technology will be the market leaders in this industry. And I think that our scientists have to get active in this area. So thank you, Alexander, for this brief but very informative overview of the aviation and airspace industries. And we have a question. Do we have Mr. Roman? Because there is a question to you. Okay, I think Roman will get back to us, but I would like to give the floor and to move to the next item, which is the use of hydrogen in water transport. And here I would like to give the floor to Mr. Advin Locke, head of the European Union Technical Assistance Project, Assistance for Dnipro Transport Development. So Mr. Advin Locke, please, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will start to share my screen. So I hope you can now see the presentation. So I will talk about energy transition in inland waterway transport with a focus on hydrogen. At present, the emissions of inland navigation vessels is governed in the European Union by Directive 1629. That directive sets emission limits for non-road mobile machinery. For inland waterway transport, this directive is only applicable to new vessels and new engines, so not for old. When focusing on options to decarbonize transport, Policy objectives worldwide form an important stick to tackle climate and environmental related challenges. As pointed out by Jose earlier, the European Commission presented its plan to reduce European Union greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% in 2030 and to zero emissions by 2050. Consequently, the Netherlands government, together with provinces, port authorities, maritime sector organizations, shippers, transport companies, banks, and research institutes, have concluded commitment to decarbonization by means of a Green Deal, in which the parties have set down ambitious goals for the sea and inland shipping sectors to become virtually climate neutral by 2050. Given the challenges in sustainability, looking at climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, and improving air quality, and the growing demand in mobility and transport, there is a need to decarbonize the inland shipping sector through smart infrastructure and services. The strategy to decarbonize transport and realize cleaner air from the perspective of inland shipping can be realized by making transport itself cleaner by switching to less polluting or zero emission solutions. Also, new logistic concepts supported by digital tools like corridor management will lead to more efficient transport that consumes less energy and thereby positively contributing to greening targets. And lastly, smart and more efficient inland waterway transport solutions, also based on the spare capacity to accommodate growth, will provide the opportunity to attract cargo flows currently transported by road or new cargo flows. Due to the lower external cost per ton kilometer transported, a model shift towards inland waterways will positively affect decarbonization targets of the transport sector. Besides, the EU targets for hydrogen in 2030 are to make 40 gigawatts of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers and to produce 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen. Today, it is not clear yet which alternative fuel will be the best solution for the future in inland waterways. With the objective of zero emission transport in mind, several options are researched and tested as transition or zero emission fuel. Europe is more progressively following a strategic approach on win-win solutions for the industry, transport, and energy sectors. Besides proven technologies like applying exhaust after treatment systems or LNG engines, for instance, 40 LNG powered new builds for Shell have been announced recently. The next few years, more innovative vessels installed with battery electric and more hydrogen fuel cell electric propulsion systems will be taken in operation. As a no-regret investment, some barge owners, some ship owners are now investing in hybrid diesel-electric solutions to enable the switch to zero-emission technologies in the future. As you can see from this picture on the screen, there are different ways to come from gray to green propulsion. The first is by electrification from fossil resources to bio or blue sources, and then to renewable sources, and also for combustion of fossil fuels via bio-blended fuels to bio-blue fuels, and then renewable synthetic fuel, including, of course, hydrogen. Now, some examples of hydrogen initiatives in the European Union. An example is the Rhine Hydrogen Integration Network of Excellence initiative on the Rhine corridor. If you want to have more information about it, you can follow the link, which is here presented. This initiative offers detailed insight into the sustainable integration of hydrogen as a transport fuel in the full value chain of the transport sectors, with one of the highest potential demands for hydrogen in inland waterway transport. The prepared rollout plan presents a strong outlook for the next steps to be taken towards actual implementation and scaling up. One of the principal findings was in order to initiate the use of hydrogen in inland shipping in the short and mid-term was swappable compressed hydrogen container system approach. This is considered most useful for the coming period. I will come back to that later. Another example is this training ship for inland navigation students of the Shipping and Transport College in Rotterdam. The casco is presently built in Serbia and will be furnished and finished in the Netherlands. This propulsion is on hydrogen. This way, the students already at school learn to work with hydrogen. Ship drive. Sustainable hydrogen integrated propulsion drives. This is a consortium of 20 companies, 25 companies and institutes in the Netherlands. It's an innovation project to speed up the integration of hydrogen. The research areas are safe, applicable technologies for hydrogen in different forms, new fuel cell systems, and technical standards for bunkering and storage. Another initiative is the Exchangeable Energy Containers by Zero Emission Services, the so-called ZESPACs. This company is founded by Wärtsilä, ENGIE, the ING Bank, and the Port of Rotterdam. ZESPAC is state-of-the-art technology in a standard 20-foot container and charged with green electricity. It currently uses lithium-ion batteries, but can be easily converted to other energy carriers like hydrogen. Strategic charging points are located throughout the Netherlands where skippers can quickly exchange their ZESPAC containers. Moreover, the charging stations can also serve as energy hubs, which can charge other modalities to provide energy to stabilize the electricity grid. ZES has developed a simple payment system based on the pay-per-use. The customer pays for the renewable electricity consumed and a rental fee for the ZESPAC container. This keeps the operating cost competitive and simplifies the transition to emission-free shipping. It is to be noted, though, that many of the hydrogen initiatives, both research projects and actual constructions of vessels, are presently still heavily subsidized. So, development of using hydrogen in inland waterway transport is still in its infancy phase. Several key challenges need to be addressed in the coming year. The production, the storage and bunkering, safety, legislation, as mentioned earlier by Mr. Czerniawski, and the cost. The following cost comparison shows that at present, hydrogen cannot compete yet with old technology. You see, a fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell costs about €2,500 per kilowatt. For an engine of 400 kilowatts and two engines per vessel, it comes up to €2 million. And then you need still the storage of hydrogen in a cryogen tank, electrical components. The electrical engines, though, are cheaper than diesel engines, but the cost of diesel engines of a comparable vessel is only €400,000. So, opportunities for Ukraine in this respect start now with zero greenhouse gas emissions engines for inland navigation, as presently inland waterway transport is not too much used in Ukraine, though the ministry has a policy to shift a lot of cargo to the inland waterways. So a lot of new ships need to be built in the coming 10 years. I would suggest to look at the possibilities to do this with zero emission engines. Cooperation with European Union and international companies in order to build up know-how, especially in the shipbuilding industry for the engines, and cooperation of research institutes and in the inland waterway transport sector, cargo owners, ship owners, and shipbuilders in Ukraine. And of course, last but not least, the business opportunities are tremendous, of course, for the production of decarbonized hydrogen. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Edwin. Thank you very much for your substantial presentation. And I think that the most important part about this presentation are the last two slides, because you're showing prospects for Ukraine particularly, and where we can find our place in terms of cooperation with European companies. And also, you are demonstrating how we could forge proper partnership with the European Union. On my side, I would like to add that we have currently 13 projects on the use of hydrogen technologies that are of EU significance, so-called IPSE, important projects of common European interest. And half of them are dedicated to the development of hydrogen infrastructure and the use of hydrogen technologies for transportation, for cargo shipment, with the use of the rivers, and also with the use of the potential of the ports of the European countries. One of the most important projects for Ukraine in this regard is the Blue Danube project. And according to that project, the countries that have the Danube River are supposed to switch to hydrogen technologies and the use of renewable energy technologies. But that project will be based on the existing port infrastructure, so that the hydrogen could be transported to 6 countries of the European Union. This project is of vital importance for Ukraine because the Danube also flows on Ukrainian territory after Romania. So the southern part of Ukraine, Odessa region, historically called Bessarabia, that is actually bordering on the Danube River, has the highest prospects from the point of view of green hydrogen production. They actually have very high prospects for renewable energy sources, both wind and solar. And in that part of Ukraine, there are also the option. There are also other solutions considered. For instance, the offshore wind parks are also considered, and our partners from Semantian and Law firm also took part in the development of a white paper for offshore wind energy that has been presented recently. And I would like to say that this project, the Blue Danube project, is focused on the creation of united logistics infrastructure. And this may be the main waterway for the hydrogen transportation. Since the demand that we have now in the EU country in terms of the Green Deal proves that we do not have enough resources to produce the required amount of hydrogen on our own. And also the European countries will have to rely on other countries to meet all the demand. That is why I think that Ukraine, as a strategic partner, should also play a role in supply of hydrogen. And that could be done also by the use of maritime and inland waterway transport. And also we hope that the vessels that will be visiting ports in Ukraine may recharge their batteries over there, maybe with hydrogen or maybe with ammonia, depending on the decision been made with regard to the fuel for certain vessels. Besides, we see that there is a close cooperation with other countries in this domain. The countries that are not the EU members anymore, namely Great Britain. And also within the framework of the Eastern Partnership, there is the initiative of starting the naval military base in Ukraine. So I hope that these are just the first steps, and further later on we will be able also to use our potential for shipbuilding with the use of hydrogen technologies. And now I would like now to pass on to my colleague who will tell us about the most widespread means of transport and motor vehicles. And I would like to give the floor to Alexei Klimenko, Deputy Director for Research of the State Enterprise Trans-NDI project. Thank you so much for giving me the floor, and I have very much enjoyed the title of my presentation that was prompted by the hosts of this event. If you don't mind, I would like to start sharing my screen now. As far as I understand, you want me to speak on this smart sustainable mobility strategy that was presented last year by the European Union. I fully agree that this strategy is very ambitious. It's impressive, it's inspiring. And this is also the task of politicians to set ambitious targets, but our task is of practical nature, which is actually giving the answer to the question, how can we attain those targets? And this is the question both to our European colleagues and also to our European actors over here, since we are trying to be the part of this ambitious process. Actually, we are overseeing the revolution from the point of view of the development of new engines for the transport, for the vehicles. And we also need funds for that. And also, who is going to pay for that? That is the answer. That is the question that needs our answer. So we have to agree on where to find the finances, who is going to pay for all of that, and how can we move forward. I will now tell you just a little bit about this strategy. By 2030, we are suggesting to have no less than 30 million of the vehicles, motor vehicles with net zero emissions, and the same amount for cargo vehicles.
Next is implementing net zero emissions on the distances that are under 500 kilometers. I'm not going to go into each sector of transport because the task to reduce emissions by 90% in transport sector will be impossible only by using the new ways, because the COP26 gave us a lot of priorities. What I would like to mention that up to 2050, the number of casualties, so people being killed in all the traffic accidents, should be reduced close to zero. And now when we are conducting this webinar, today actually, the European Commission should present next 4 large packages for further development of the so-called green mobility, efficient and green mobility. And soon we will see what is going to be proposed. And if you don't mind, I would like to focus more on the point what the advantages are in the water strategies and the development of the waterway transport. The topic of pollution and emissions and resource consumption should be looked at in the life cycle of energy production and transport. All the way from the operations and also the production of infrastructure, which also takes resources, the maintenance and machine building, energy, and of course, raw material sourcing. All these life cycle stages take energy. And we can only achieve the goals by using this system-based approach. And this approach have been developed and it's being used. And although many European countries are giving preference to electric batteries and electric vehicles, but in terms of the whole of the life cycle, we need to focus more on more intensive development of the hydrogen technologies that have more advantages in terms of the entire life cycle. I'm not going to go into the methodology of the research and mathematical modeling, but we have done some forecasts using different scenarios for the development of the Ukrainian transport. Here you can see the change of the transport structure. You see the technological structure and the share of electric vehicles, both the battery types vehicles and fuel cell vehicles. So these are the forecasts for the increase of the energy consumption by different types of energy using the basic scenario for economic development. And we have considered multiple scenarios for the economic development and the public regulation. And according to the basic scenario, if nothing is changed, soon we are going to go over the permittable threshold of CO2 emissions, and we will not be able to achieve a nationally determined contribution. And it will be a huge violation of our commitments. We have also looked at different changes depending on the transport use and use of different energy sources, including alternative sources. And here you see the trend of the emissions in different scenarios. I'm not going to go into all the slides because there are many of the scenarios here, but introduction of strict energy efficiency standards and the CO2 norms for different types of transport. It will not enable us to achieve the international commitments using the basic scenario. If you use this marginal scenario of the increased share of electric vehicles, even using this scenario, the CO2 emissions in transport sector will continue to grow. And this is related to the structure of electricity generation in Ukraine. And without changing the structure, it's impossible to resolve this situation. And the same goes to the other emissions. As we know, one outdated vehicle can emit as much gases as 1,000 modern vehicles. So this regulation has to be really comprehensive, setting requirements not only to new vehicles, but to the vehicles that are already on the roads. So guaranteed reduction of CO2 emissions and achieving the commitments, which is 60% by 2030, cannot be guaranteed even if we implement the strict requirements. And even if you have the explosive growth of electric vehicles, it will take other measures based on the European experience as well, which will introduction of environmental labeling and other measures. This is just an example of the reduction of emissions by different regulation scenarios. And you can see that unfortunately, there will be no sharp reduction of emissions because a lot of vehicles that we have on our roads are outdated. And you know what's going to happen with the vehicles that are outdated in Germany according to the net zero strategy. So the solution for this lies in a comprehensive approach of our public regulation. Now, in terms of regulation, in the beginning, there was a question to the Ministry of Infrastructure. I apologize. I would like to report that the Ministry of Infrastructure is now considering the draft law, the draft concept of the state policy in regulation of the transport vehicles, in labeling and everything that is related to emissions in production and disposal of batteries. So the ministry is planning to tackle this point. I understand that I'm out of time, but I would like to briefly touch on the main elements. And I want to say that there are no vehicles with the zero emissions. This year at the high-level event of the European Commission, we reported on the implementation of this concept of regulation and the environmental impact of the transport vehicles. And we are considering here 64 main pollutants, including weighted particles. And these weighted particles emitted by the cars lead to the increased level of mortality compared to traffic accidents. And what we have in Kiev is really a catastrophic increase of public health impact. So that goes to the pollutants emitted by the car. So we know that the gasoline engine car Euro 6 Plus emits 19.2 CO2, per 1 kilometer. And if you compare the emissions of the weighted particles by the electric car, both hydrogen or battery vehicle, it will be 4.7 grams. So 4 to 5 times less than gasoline engine vehicle. So we have reached the threshold here. And if you look at the proposal to the Euro 7 norms that are going to be mandatory for implementation very soon, we know that ICE has reached its threshold. And it has to be replaced, but it will take some time. So I apologize, Mr. Oleksiy, but we really have to wrap up. Okay, I will wrap up by saying that this regulation concept that we are now considering provides for introduction of transport labeling by the type of pollution, as you can see on the slide. And we are going to introduce environmental zones in the cities, giving priorities to the use of electric cars and fuel cell cars. And that covers also the disposal of vehicles, including the batteries. Thank you, and I apologize for taking too much of your time. No problem. Thank you very much for your presentation, because the approach that you have demonstrated really proves that you are working on these important priorities and you're analyzing the situation that is very relevant for Ukraine, because we can take lots of different studies and research, but they will be quite general regarding the strategy development in Ukraine. And we don't want to make a strategy for the sake of strategy. We want to really achieve the relevant targets that we set for ourselves in nationally determined contributions. And we will be able then to reduce the emissions. And this example that you have given, that Euro 3 or Euro 4, those outdated cars that have been imported to Ukraine, I think they will really make the environment much worse in Ukraine. And this process should go into disposal, but instead we see that our fellow citizens are taking this opportunity to buy cheap cars that are unfortunately being brought into Ukraine from European countries, and they're very polluting. And the figures that you have given are really awful, but nevertheless, we have to balance this process somehow and to make it as comfortable as possible for our citizens, because everything that we are doing is for the best interests of Ukrainians, so that our life will be more citizens friendly. Thank you again for your presentation. I think we will make it available to the participants after the event, because it is very informative and it will take some time to process it.
Since your presentation was so informative, we actually needed to comment on some of those figures probably later. So we will get back to you after our today's event as well. With regard to presentation, I would like to say that it is available on the website of our entity. I'm not sure whether it's available today or not, but it will be available on our website, and you could actually have a closer look at all those figures. And I would like to say that our colleague is also contributing very much to development of hydrogen fuel motor vehicles in Ukraine. And Alexander Diachenko is one of the owners of the first hydrogen fueled car that has been imported to Ukraine and properly certified. And now we have the following question. How do you actually fill this station with hydrogen? And how can we have the hydrogen filling stations all over the roadside areas in Ukraine? Alexander, over to you. Well, hi again. Thank you for those introductions. Well, thanks. Thanks for the introduction. And, I think that now we have the answer to the question, which came first, chicken or an egg? I have a car, so now we need the filling stations. I would like to say that hydrogen economy and hydrogen in transportation is inevitable process. And from this slide, you can see that already now all biggest car manufacturers are converting to fuel cell production. And starting from 2022, and they are manufacturing these cars. I do not think that we will have too many diesel-driven or gasoline-driven cars. I think that globally the trend will be to switch to hydrogen fuel vehicles. If you are simply using your car for driving it in the city, and if you are not covering more than 100 kilometers per day, then you should opt for electric vehicles. And if we're talking about the distances of over 100 kilometers, this is especially relevant for public transportation and also cargo vehicles. Over here, you can see the number of hydrogen fueling stations globally. Japan is on the front runner because they have been using the hydrogen fuel electric vehicles for quite a while, and they've been developing hydrogen economy for the past 10 years. Germany came second in this ranking. This is the record holder for Europe. This high number of hydrogen filling stations could be explained by the proper access to finances. And it also could be explained by the fact that Germany is a trendsetter for European countries, and other countries are simply trying to catch up with Germany. I read an interesting news about Austria. Austria opened the hydrogen filling station, and Austria now wants to be the country like Ukraine, Poland, and other European countries, catching up with Germany in terms of hydrogen filling stations. And over here, you can see the distribution of this filling stations in Europe. And also, I would like to mention Great Britain in this regard. Great Britain currently is the country that, except for the planes, as I mentioned in my previous presentation, except for hydrogen fueled aircraft, is also focusing on passenger vehicles that will be a fuel cell. And the cars could be filled at the pressure of 700 bars, and buses could be filled under the pressure of 350 bar. So you see that we have the UK over here, Germany, and the Netherlands. These are the three leading countries in this regard. Now let's discuss the way the hydrogen fueling station actually works. They may come in different sizes. And I guess the classical example is the use of green energy from solar wind power. Then by means of electrolysis, we can obtain green hydrogen that further is used as a fuel for your fuel cell electric vehicle. This whole chain of production is located very close to the filling station. So the production, the storage, and the dispensing are carried out on the filling station or close by to the filling station. Depending on the capacity of the fueling station, the hydrogen may be transported in tanks, storage tanks, and later on it could be used and it could be stored in the compressed storage systems. If we take a closer look at the filling station, we can see that it looks like an ordinary one. The dispensing actually takes place in the same manner as for the gasoline. There is nothing new to a driver except for the hydrogen being on the dispenser. From the technical point of view, we may say that the filling stations may come in different sizes. So there may be the filling stations that have the capacity of filling vehicles at 700 bars, require an extra unit for this high pressure, but and it requires extra funding, but for the quick fueling, it is a necessary requirement. When we speak about hydrogen fueling stations, we cannot help by mentioning the companies that are already working on that in Ukraine. One of such companies is H2Drive. This is the company that is currently working on the whole chain of hydrogen filling stations covering all territory of Ukraine. This chain will be connected to two TNT corridors, and you know that these motorways and corridors have been set out in the legislation, and you know that there is a requirement, specific requirement for the amount of fueling stations on the motorways and the distance between them. It is also important to mention that some of these corridors are already in operation. But given that one cargo truck costs about 1 to 2 million euro, the process is a bit slow, but I believe that next year will be the key year for more corridors to be opened. And I hope that from the point of view of legislative legal framework, we will have the proper regulations set in place that would ban driving European motorways on diesel-driven vehicles, or you will have to pay the CO2 emission tax. So that's it from my part, and I'd be happy to answer questions if any. Thank you, Alexander. I see that this movement has already begun, and I see that there is an interactive map of hydrogen filling stations in the European countries. I don't know whether we can actually show it on the screen. Well, at least I have an access to this interactive map. And let me tell you about that map the following. While you can check the amount of these filling stations, 137 in total for the EU. 14 are in progress, the construction being at the final stage. And there are 40 filling stations that are currently under construction. So in total, that will be over 200 filling stations. This is what this interactive map looks like. And if you zoom in, you can see the location of this filling station. So these green pins are the hydrogen fueling stations, mostly located in Germany. But we see that in the EU, you can easily drive the fuel cell electric vehicle, and you are able to find the hydrogen fueling station both for light duty vehicles, and also for heavy duty vehicles. I know that in probably in the European partners could cooperate with the Ukrainian partners, like the company you have mentioned, and hopefully we will have another pin on this map on Ukrainian part as well. That will contribute to the future network of fuel cell electric vehicles being very widespread. Thank you so much, Alexander, for your presentation. Your information is highly relevant, and actually we have the question to you. Could you update us on the timelines for the design and construction of the first hydrogen filling station in Ukraine? Thank you for this question. I should say that given that we have this hydrogen boost globally, and we have the proper technologies already existing, but the technologies are not very affordable. We know that for electrolyzers, it takes about 12 months to be manufactured, and relevant infrastructure also takes over a year. So I think that next year we will be able to actually decrease this time span. Currently, the demand is higher than the supply. And responding to your question, I should say that next year probably is the answer. Could you be more specific? Well, yes, probably third or second quarter of next year. Thank you. So we hope that your plans would come true, since in Ukraine we have more than 10 high fuel cell electric vehicles. And I'm sure that the owners of these cars are looking forward for you to make the announcement of the first hydrogen filling station being commissioned. And we hope that that filling station would operate in accordance with all the safety requirements and safety standards that hopefully by that time would be already in place in Ukraine. Thank you, Alexander.
And now I would like to give the floor to Artem Semantian. And we would like to discuss now the role of renewable energy in the development of the modern transport infrastructure. Thank you, Alexander. Truly, this topic, the new transport infrastructure, is very ambitious. So how should it look like? Well, the new transport infrastructure should be a transport which will be environmentally and climate friendly and also energy independent. These are the main challenges that the whole world is facing. The climate impact being a top one. Secondly is energy independence. And thirdly, the efficiency of transport. So the new transport infrastructure should meet all these three criteria. And I see this that the new renewable source of energy will help us to meet all these three criteria. So let's go into details of this new infrastructure. Well, we can utilize more electricity instead of oil, or we can use more hydrogen. But we also need to understand that these resources cannot be produced by fossil fuels, or like coal or oil, because we will then be caught in this vicious circle trying to achieve decarbonization using electricity instead of coal, but the electricity will be produced with the fossil fuels. So the same goes for hydrogen. It should be the hydrogen that is green hydrogen, not using fossil fuel. So the only economically efficient option and climate friendly option would be green hydrogen.
That is quite a substantial amount, and we believe that till 2040, the hydrogen would become much more widespread. That is why we have to consider certain programs that would incentivize the sectors that could use hydrogen technologies. Transportation sector, first and foremost, also storage and production of electricity. And we know that without such support, this sector will not develop properly, and we will not be able to attain those results that are required and required by political activists and leaders. And we also can think of what type of energy resources we are using. If we are using the fossil fuels, there is no victor in this to us. But we know that green energy could be used. Solar or wind energy or biomass are other options. So we know that decarbonization of transport sector have become popular earlier than in time. We know that wind and solar energy has been used for quite a while, but now when electric vehicles are becoming more popular and we are using and we are converting from internal combustion engines to the electric engines, we have the opportunity to refuse from the fossil fuels. But if we do not use the electricity that is derived from fossil fuels.
So the green energy becomes more efficient, and this year it's becoming more efficient for industrial consumers, although the price is going higher, like it's increased by 30% in Ukraine, and next year we expect even further increase due to some international aspects of pricing, not only in Ukraine, but globally. So green generation is becoming one of the most economically efficient. And as I see it, the new transport infrastructure should be closely connected to the construction of green generating capacity. And we already have such cases like in France, where they're building new filling stations using solar power, wind power to fill electric vehicles. And they can produce green hydrogen on the spot, on the site. It may seem as a distant future for us, but I believe that it will happen much sooner in Ukraine. Like electric vehicles came to Ukraine, and nobody expected that we will have such high share. While in Norway, it's 96% of new cars being sold are electric vehicles. And 5 years ago, we couldn't even imagine that, because electric vehicles were just a novelty, being a 5 to 10% share, and now it's 96% share. So it's a matter of change of mentality. Also, I want to say that Ukraine has very ambitious NDDs, which was approved by the government in summer. And this also relates to transport sector. And transport should become the sector where the most changes take place. And today we have already heard about the railway instead of motor vehicles for cargo transport. And recently I watched the news from Deutsche Welle, and they talk about the substitution of motor cargo transport with railway cargo. Well, it has to do with the labor market, because the cargo vehicle driver is not a very attractive job anymore in Europe. But on the other side, it's also using hydrogen-powered water transport that can generate and use green energy. And I personally saw some boats like that in Netherlands. For example, there was a boat with the solar power and hydrogen engine. It has to be, of course, recharged, but it is self-sustainable kind of water transport. And Alexander talked about the hydrogen-powered trains that have been in operation in Europe for 2 or 3 years. And considering the simplicity of this technology, because it is simple, it is much more simple to have an electric engine than the ICE engine. The matter of energy storage is a whole different matter. But as we scale it up, I believe we will get a lot more economic benefits and better opportunities for servicing this transport. So I would like to give another important news. today in the European Union, an official magazine, they published the new taxonomy of the EU, where they identified sustainable investment areas. And it's a pleasure to know that green energy is taking the top positions on that list. And EU decided that gas and nuclear energy are not going to be subject to sustainable financing. And since more than half of all the investment funds will be directed to sustainability, this taxonomy will actually start working from January next year. And that really identifies green energy, green hydrogen as top priority recipients for sustainable financing. So we can say that the state support, state aid should incentivize these areas. There are many positions on the green tariff, and in the media, it is being demonized as one of the corrupt practices, but it is not really. The green tariff was introduced in Germany 20 years ago, back in 2003, I believe, and it proven to be very effective. And it is an area that enabled Germany to launch green energy. And now we have more than 50% of green energy in German generation structure. And Germany needed 20 years or even less to achieve this 50%. There are some cases when 100% of energy generated in Germany were fully renewable energy. And even some of that energy was exported to other countries. So we see how energy systems are changing, and that really correlates to what Alexander showed. 90 filling stations are working in Germany, hydrogen filling stations. This is very economically beneficial. But in the beginning, it takes kind of this magic kick in the rear, and the state should do that, should make this kick. And once it is done, we will see the development of the new transport infrastructure. And we should really start the implementation of hydrogen technologies in the transport sector, because more and more people will be able to learn about hydrogen, and it will become part of our daily reality and will become the technology that will be familiar to average residents. And there are already strategies that include hydrogen storage systems in residential buildings in case when there are shortages of electricity supply, then there will be like hydrogen powered power banks. And there are industrial solutions like that being sold in the US already. So these technologies will enable the complete stepping aside from fossil fuels. But my position that it really makes a difference what type of hydrogen we use, and it has to be green hydrogen. Well, I think we should address this next question to you. There are some debates about the hydrogen produced with using the nuclear power stations. Can you elaborate on that? Thank you. Well, there are debatable reports. Well, there is a certain classification which is not approved, as far as I know, by some regulation, but there is this kind of tradition to classify hydrogen by its production, and there are some colors that reflect the origin of hydrogen. Regarding the hydrogen produced with the using nuclear energy. I believe it is pink colored hydrogen. It is not green hydrogen. We can go in some technical details for a second. In order to produce 1 kilowatt of nuclear energy in the nuclear power station, we need fossil fuel like uranium or some other resources, and these are not renewable sources. And in order to get them, we need to extract them from subsoil. And in the nature, there is a limited number of these resources. So the fossil fuels are limited by default, and it is difficult to relate it with the renewable resources because it is limited. So in terms of logic, classifying this as pink hydrogen using the nuclear power is justified, and it should belong to some other segments, because really the difference here is that using nuclear power for generation, there are no significant CO2 emissions. And I'm saying significant because there are some emissions. And this is why we have this confusion. Some people are saying that it is almost green, but in fact, it is better to classify it as a separate category, like a pink color. So it's a nuclear hydrogen.
I would like to add that according to the European hydrogen strategy, there is the proper classification and the description of which hydrogen could be considered as green hydrogen, and low carbon hydrogen is this pink hydrogen as well. But we are talking about clean environment. We are talking about greenhouse gases emission, but also there is the emission of heat in the process of getting nuclear electricity from nuclear power plants. Respectively, we have this color coding that was just explained by Artem. We have had fruitful discussion on the technologies for hydrogen production and the use of it in various means of transport. But I think that the illegal aspect is of high importance as well. That is why I would like to give the floor to Ms. Marina Gritsishina, who will tell us about legal mechanisms for safe storage and transportation of green hydrogen. Good afternoon, everyone. We will have this presentation together with Natalia Gutarevich. Let's have a look at the following slide. I would like to say that in the European countries, everyone is waiting for the gas directive to come into force, and the directive on the access to gas transmission systems. This package of documents is very important for decarbonization of gas market. These two papers also called the hydrogen and decarbonized gas market package. The European Commission is supposed to pass these two papers to the consideration, to the review of the European Parliament and respective committee. But if we have a look at these two documents that are of open access, these two documents need to be reviewed in order to regulate the storage, transmission, and the supply of hydrogen, and also other low carbon gases. On this slide, I would like to explain to you in detail what is to be expected of these two directives. directive and regulation. This directive and this regulation contain the definition of low carbon hydrogen. Unfortunately, no definition of green hydrogen. We also have definition of low carbon gases, hydrogen entity, hydrogen network, and the operator of hydrogen network, and among other definitions. Apart from that, these two documents also cover the reconfiguration of existing gas pipelines that could be converted for hydrogen transmission. According to these two documents, the additional procedures should be avoided. And at the same time, the specifications for green hydrogen should be taken into consideration in the process of retrofitting the existing gas transmission systems. Besides, these two documents also cover the certification requirements for renewable and low carbon gases. That is also very important for the production of green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is referred to as renewable gas, and respectively, its production is supposed to be regulated by the Directive of Renewable Energy Sources, which is also supposed to be implemented by Ukraine in accordance with a clean energy package that was passed by the ministerial meeting this year. Apart from certification requirement, the directive also covers the hybrid technology. The draft regulation also sets out for the restrictions on the blending of hydrogen with natural gas, and it should be no more than 5% since the 1st of October 2025. There is also the need to separate operators of hydrogen networks from other gas transmission system operators, and the certification will be similar to ENSO-E and ENSO-G as we have for natural gas. In accordance with these documents and in accordance with these drafts, the EU is expecting the members of the EU to implement the following direction, the above-mentioned directive and regulation within the next 2 years. In accordance with the agreement that was held with the European Energy Community, the Ukraine is supposed to harmonize its system with this requirements as well. And now I'd like to pass on to Natalia Gutarevich. Thank you, Marina. And I would like now to continue our presentation. If we consider the EU regulations and directives, we may notice that not just legal drafters are trying to reform the rules pertaining to hydrogen, green hydrogen, and renewable gases, but the energy regulators are also contributing to the process, since currently they are considering the best options of regulation of the process of green hydrogen transmission in the EU. ACER, which is the Agency of Cooperation of Energy Regulators in the EU, conducted substantial research on how the hydrogen is currently used in the European countries, and in its white paper that is titled When and How to Regulate Hydrogen Networks, that was made public in February 2021, ACER provided 6 recommendations on the regulation of hydrogen networks. These recommendations are as follows. The approach should be step by step. The step-by-step approach to regulation of a hydrogen network, and it should be commensurate with the development of the market and infrastructure. Besides, the dynamic approach is to be applied to the process of regulation, and there should be the regular monitoring of the market. The regulation rules are to be clarified from the very beginning. Besides, temporary exemptions are also allowed in the case of B2B infrastructure being created. Such infrastructure does not fall under the general rules for the regulation of the overall network. Besides, another recommendation is to take into consideration the advantages of reuse of exhaust gases and also reuse of gases for hydrogen transmission. And one more recommendation is to avoid cross-subsidizing between gas and hydrogen consumers. We know that there are clear requirements for the regulation of the market for the natural gas in the EU, but we believe that it makes no sense to copy it blindly in terms of the hydrogen market. For instance, we should consider unbundling and the access of third parties to the network, and also the tariffs, setting the tariffs in this sector. If we have a look at Ukraine in particular, in terms of hydrogen network regulation, we should pay attention to the following documents. First and foremost, there is the decision passed by the Defense and Security Council of Ukraine that came into force on the 30th of July 2021. And according to that decision, there is the deadline for passing hydrogen strategy, December 31st, 2021. Besides, it outlines the legal framework for the proper transmission system and the pipeline been used to transport hydrogen from Ukraine to the EU and vice versa. Besides, we know that there are quite a few standards that came into effect on the 1st of May 2021. Many of them pertain to hydrogen fuel and hydrogen systems, and also the commercial and the residential use and industrial use of electrolysis of water. Another important document that should be taken into consideration is the draft roadmap for the production and use of hydrogen in Ukraine, and also the roadmap for the use of hydrogen for the motor vehicles. At the moment, these roadmaps are just the drafts, and we expect these documents to be properly discussed, reviewed, and used further in hydrogen projects.
So if we look at the roadmaps, they identify the main transportation types of hydrogen that can be applied in Ukraine. For transportation is the railway, waterway, motorway, which we have already considered. Today, regarding the storage of hydrogen, some words have been already mentioned, that there are two types of hydrogen that can be stored, which is liquid hydrogen and gas hydrogen, or compressed gas hydrogen. The next slide shows some of the projects being implemented in Ukraine. Recently, one of the TSO's operators showed some potential for hydrogen, and they identified actually that the TSO operator is considering the way to use the gas pipeline called Progress, and adjusting it to use hydrogen to supply hydrogen in the southern Ukraine, which has a lot of potential in terms of green hydrogen projects and the renewable energy production and for the further production of green hydrogen. And on these photos, you see the pipelines that can be potentially used for transportation of hydrogen. Next slide, please. If we look at the situation in terms of the studies being done in distribution network, it is a well-known project by Erchika company, regional gas company. And recently there was some information, and Jose actually noted that in his presentation. This is the project by this regional gas company, which is part of the Green Clean Hydrogen Alliance, and that improved the color of Ukraine on this map, making it brighter green, showing that there are more hydrogen projects being implemented in Ukraine. And this particular project by RGC is aimed at using hydrogen in gas distribution network. In terms of storage, hydrogen storage, Ukrtransgaz highlights the research being done. For example, they're considering transferring one of the underground storages in Lugansk region to use it for hydrogen storage, or the mixture of hydrogen and methane. And there is another interesting project, joint project between Naftogaz and Ukrtransgaz that joined the European initiative for producing green hydrogen. It is located in the western part of Ukraine, and it is focused at transporting hydrogen to the EU by gas pipeline, and with the possibility of storing it in gas storage facilities. Yes, next slide, please. Yes, thank you for your attention. The conclusion, well, is that we would like all the public officials and legislators to monitor the changes being implemented in our partner countries, in the EU countries, because they are developing a lot of regulations that we are obliged to implement, and we should be interested to implement them. Thank you. Yes, we see that there are many initiatives that take place in Ukraine, and they are actually following on the European initiatives, and we mentioned that in the beginning of our webinar, and the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure also mentioned that. And we see that a lot of stakeholders are being active in this area. And at least in your presentation, you mentioned TSO, one of the TSOs, which plays a key role in this process for supplying hydrogen into the EU countries, because using our gas pipeline infrastructure is a super significant advantage compared to other countries, because pipeline network is the cheapest transport. If you use other types of transport, that means that we will have to compete with other countries that have, I would call it, more advantages in terms of renewable energy production, like Chile and Australia, although they are quite far away, but the potential of using solar and wind energy is significantly higher compared to Ukraine. But nevertheless, the matter of water resources also remains very high on our agenda. And we discussed that in our working groups together with the Ministry of Environment. And we already have the draft hydrogen strategy, which is being developed by the experts of the Renewable Energy Institute. And I hope that with the leadership of Mr. Kudria, this document is going to be published as the scientific article very soon. And very soon, all the working group members will be able to use this document as the basis for developing the strategy, because this work has been taking place for a year already, and using the experience of other European countries and translating it into Ukrainian context, we see what has to be adapted to Ukrainian realities. Because overall, we don't need to invent a wheel, but we need to understand the situation in our country, especially in the energy sector, so that we can avoid some complications. So we need to have some really thorough discussions. And I believe that these discussions will start very soon in terms of this strategy, because the working groups are ready for this discussion, and we have relevant experts in Ukraine. And I want to thank the representatives of the European Technical Assistance Projects for their participation. Mr. Jose, thank you very much for finding time to share with us your vision, how this is done in the EU countries, and how we can avoid making mistakes. I believe that this conference is going to be a good foundation to strengthen technical cooperation between the Ministry of Infrastructure and European funded projects. Because now this discussion is becoming more active. And we are moving from concepts into project implementations. And in order to implement projects, we need to synchronize the goals that we have in our countries. And especially considering that the European countries are willing to support us in energy efficiency and energy security. So I believe this is the beginning of our productive dialogue, and there are many projects ahead of us. And we have had a good discussion of the types of projects that we can implement for all types of transport, where there is a high potential in Ukraine. And we have a few minutes left for a discussion. And if you have questions, we'll be able to take them now. Well, if there are no questions, I want to thank everyone for their participation. It was a good discussion. And all processes will take place much faster than we can expect. And hydrogen technology is the technology of not 10 years in the future, but of tomorrow. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your participation.